Hi there, my name's Aileen, and 10 years ago, my mother accused me of something I didn't do, something that shattered every bond I thought was unbreakable. Now, after a decade of silence, she wants to reconnect, like nothing ever happened. But can a wound that deep ever truly heal? Or are some scars too permanent to cover up? Before we dive in, have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted the most? What time are you listening to this? And where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd really love to hear your story. The apartment was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. It was almost midnight when my phone lit up on the coffee table, casting a pale glow across the dim room. I didn't move right away. Texts this late were never good news, and something in my chest tightened before I even glanced at the screen. It was from Denise. "Mom's about to call you. Brace yourself." My thumb hovered above the screen. I reread the message twice, feeling my heartbeat begin to quicken. The words weren't long, but they carried the weight of something heavy, something inevitable. I set the phone down and stood, pacing to the window, watching the streetlights flicker in the misty Portland night. Then it came, the phone vibrating violently in the silent room. One ring, a second ring. In my family, 2 rings meant an emergency. Hands cold, I answered. The sound that greeted me was chaos. My mother's voice, raw and trembling, sliced through the receiver. Somewhere in the background, voices overlapped in angry bursts. She must have stepped into another room because the noise dulled, and suddenly it was just her, sobbing. "Aileen," she choked out, "tell me the truth. Just tell me." I stumbled back, hitting the edge of the kitchen counter. "What are you talking about?" My voice cracked, sounding foreign to my own ears. Did you do something to Morgan?" she wailed. The blood drained from my face. "Morgan, my cousin. The last time I had seen her, she was just a kid. I hadn't thought about her in years." "Mom, no," I started, panic rising like bile, but she cut me off, her words tumbling out faster, more hysterical. "She told us everything. How you touched her when she was little, how you hurt her. She remembered it all. She told Denise. She told everyone." I tried to form words, tried to breathe through the dizzying shock, but it was like my body forgot how to work. I gasped into the phone, but it didn't matter. She wasn't listening. "You're sick," she screamed. "Don't you dare lie to me now." Tears burned my eyes. I stammered, "I didn't. Mom, I swear." But the line went dead. I stood there, phone pressed against my ear, long after the call had ended. The silence on the line was somehow louder than her screams had been. My fingers trembled as I lowered the phone. That's when Denise's earlier text slammed into me again, with a clarity that made my stomach turn. She knew. She knew before Mom even called, and she hadn't warned me, hadn't defended me. She had let me walk straight into a slaughter. The kitchen lights buzzed faintly overhead. The world around me felt wrong, like it had shifted an inch to the left and left me stumbling. I dropped to the floor, my legs giving out beneath me. Sitting there on the cold tile, I texted Denise. No answer. I texted Marla. Nothing. I tried calling Dad. Voicemail. I sent a message to Morgan, begging for an explanation, for some sense in the senselessness. No response. The blue glow of the screen blurred through my tears. Then just as I dropped the phone onto the floor beside me, it buzzed again. And somehow I knew the worst wasn't over yet. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the kitchen floor. I sat there, frozen in the stale air of my apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of my own ragged breathing. For a long time, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only exist in the hollow space that had cracked open inside me. Eventually, my fingers found the phone again. I called my father, the one person I still believed might hear me out. 1 ring, 2, straight to voicemail. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he was asleep. I sent a text. "Dad, please, call me." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, then finally a buzz. I snatched up the phone with shaking hands, hope flaring against all reason. One message. "Don't contact us anymore. We need time to heal." That single line hit harder than any accusation, harder than my mother's screams, harder than Denise's betrayal. It was my father's voice, even in writing, firm, cold, decided. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who picked me up early from school when I was sick, who promised me once that no matter what happened, family would always stick together, gone. The screen dimmed, my reflection staring back at me, hollow-eyed, small, unfamiliar. Days passed in a blur after that night. I moved through them like a ghost. The world outside kept spinning, but I was trapped somewhere else, someplace where time didn't know how to move forward. I tried to forward some important college documents to my parents' address, the only stable mailing address I had. A few days later, a letter came back to my dorm mailbox. Address refused by recipient. I remember just standing there in the campus mailroom, that letter trembling in my hand, students brushing past me like I wasn't even there, like I was invisible, not just unwanted, erased. I walked across the quad under the heavy gray sky. Every face I passed was a reminder that somewhere families were normal, somewhere parents fought for their children instead of discarding them like broken things. I sat on a splintered bench by the frozen fountain, scrolling through my contacts one by one. Mom, Dad, Denise, Marla, Morgan. I deleted them all, one swipe at a time. It didn't feel powerful, it didn't feel freeing. It just felt necessary, like pulling out a splinter that had already festered too long under the skin. By the time the rain started to fall, I had no numbers left, no family left, just me. Standing there, soaked to the bone, I realized something I hadn't been ready to see before. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't something we were going to work through. They had made a choice. And standing under the freezing sky, teeth chattering, heart barely beating, I made a choice too. I would never, ever beg them to love me again. The cold was sharp enough to bite through my coat as I walked down the quiet street. Every house I passed glowed with warm yellow lights, Christmas trees pressed against windows like promises of something I no longer had. Wreaths hung neatly on polished doors. Laughter drifted faintly through the air, a reminder that elsewhere life continued in a way that would never include me again. I clutched my grocery bag tighter, the corner of a loaf of bread peeking out as if embarrassed for me. My apartment building loomed ahead, a plain block of concrete with no decorations, no welcome. Inside, the smell of old carpets and forgotten dreams greeted me. In the corner of my living room stood a small plastic tree I had dug out from a clearance bin weeks ago. A few battery-operated lights blinked lazily along its fake branches. I dropped the groceries on the counter and collapsed onto the couch, the silence pressing in harder than the chill outside. For some reason, I opened my phone. Big mistake. My social media feed exploded with images, family gatherings, tables groaning under feasts, toddlers tearing at wrapping paper under sparkling trees. Then I saw them, my parents, Denise, Marla, Morgan, all smiling, arms around each other, matching pajamas, cheesy grins. They looked complete, like I had never existed, not a single empty seat, not a hint that someone was missing. I sat there staring at the screen until the battery warning flashed red, but it wasn't until I saw the tree in the background that my heart truly cracked. My childhood ornaments hung on their tree, the handmade clay angel I had crafted in 3rd grade, crooked but proudly painted, the wooden sled Dad helped me carve, even the glittery snowflake that always lost a few sparkles every year. There they were. No one had even thought to ask if I wanted them. No one had remembered whose fingers had shaped them, or maybe they had, and decided it didn't matter. No one texted, no one called, no one wished me a Merry Christmas. I wasn't just forgotten, I was erased. I thought that was the worst it could get. Until Denise posted another photo later that night, a close-up of Morgan laughing under the tree, wearing a dress I had worn to Christmas dinner when I was 16. My favorite green velvet dress, the one Mom said brought out my eyes. Morgan sat in my old seat by the fireplace, her legs tucked up just the way I used to sit, surrounded by smiles meant for someone else. My breath left me in a rush. They hadn't just deleted me, they had replaced me. I dropped the phone on the couch and turned to look at my tiny tree, its plastic branches drooping under the weight of cheap ornaments. The lights blinked weakly, like they were struggling to stay alive. I knelt in front of it, resting my forehead against the scratchy plastic needles, and whispered to no one. They didn't lose me, they chose to delete me. Somewhere deep inside, something cold and sharp took root. A quiet resolve. I stood, wiped my face on the sleeve of my sweatshirt, and picked up my phone. One by one, I logged out of every account that connected me to them. Facebook, Instagram, family group chats. Gone. Not with anger, not with bitterness, just gone. I wasn't going to watch them celebrate my absence anymore. I wasn't going to keep giving them front row seats to the life they threw away. I turned off my phone, set it face down on the counter, and walked to the window. Outside, the snow had started to fall, covering the world in quiet, soft layers. Inside, for the first time in months, I felt something almost like peace. At first, it was subtle. The spaces between text messages stretched wider. Invitations to coffee or movies stopped coming. The small talks at work shifted, words growing careful and smiles tightening into polite masks. I told myself it was the season, that everyone was busy, that I was imagining things, but even the walls seemed to whisper otherwise. One morning at work, while pretending to scroll through emails, I caught the tail end of a conversation near the coffee machine. Yeah, something with her cousin, I think. Not sure on the details, but, the words weren't meant for me, but they found me anyway, sharp and cold as January wind. No one asked if it was true. No one asked for my side. I was guilty by rumor, sentenced without a trial. I walked through the halls at work like a ghost, careful not to meet anyone's eyes. Lunch breaks were spent alone in my car, engine humming softly beneath the rain. Even the receptionist, who once greeted me with jokes and warm smiles, now nodded at me with the strained politeness reserved for strangers you're forced to tolerate. The city, once vibrant and familiar, began to feel like a labyrinth of locked doors. It wasn't until a former classmate slipped me a truth I wasn't ready to hear that I understood just how far the rot had spread. It was Denise, she whispered one evening after catching me outside a bookstore, both of us pretending it wasn't awkward. She told people, made it sound real. I thanked her, though the words tasted like ash. Denise hadn't just abandoned me. She had made sure there would be nowhere for me to land. I stopped going to networking events. I skipped birthday dinners I was once begged to attend. My social media, once cluttered with casual friendships, shriveled to a barren landscape of silent profiles and unanswered messages. Portland, my Portland, shrank around me, colder and smaller every day. The final crack came one rainy afternoon. I was standing at a bus stop on Burnside, the wind slicing straight through my coat. People huddled around me, faces blank, eyes sliding past without recognition. The city I had once loved had no place for me now. Or maybe it never had. Maybe love, like belonging, was just another story we told ourselves when we were young enough to believe in happy endings. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat I had stubbornly stayed in, even as the messages dried up. Birthday wishes I never received. Inside jokes I was no longer part of. Plans made and executed without me. I hovered for a moment, thumb trembling slightly, then hit leave group. A confirmation message blinked back at me. Are you sure you want to leave? I tapped yes without hesitation. The bus roared past, spraying water up onto the sidewalk, soaking my shoes. I watched it disappear into the mist without me. In the fogged reflection of the storefront behind me, I barely recognized the woman staring back. If I don't exist to them, I whispered, voice lost in the rain. Maybe I can at least exist for myself. And for the first time in months, the thought didn't feel hollow. It felt like a beginning. The apartment was colder than usual when I pushed the door open, shedding my soaked coat onto the back of a chair. Rain tapped a soft, relentless rhythm against the window panes. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and leaned against the counter, letting the silence press against me, heavy and familiar. My phone vibrated on the table. I ignored it at first. Lately, it was usually spam calls or work notifications I didn't care enough to check, but something made me glance over this time. A number I didn't recognize blinked back at me, waiting. I stared at it, pulse thudding loud in my ears. It could be anyone. It could be nothing. I picked up the phone anyway. One new message. We miss you. Things are different now. Please talk to us. I sat down hard on the kitchen chair, the weight of the words knocking the air out of me. My fingers gripped the phone too tightly, as if it might shatter and take me with it. It had been nearly 10 years. 10 years of silence. 10 years of birthdays forgotten, holidays ignored, milestones passed by in shadows. And now this. Miss me. I reread the message until the words blurred together. Was it real? Was it a mistake? A cruel joke? Or worse, was it a trap? I didn't know what hurt more. The sudden surge of hope clawing at my chest, or the sick twist of cynicism warning me not to fall for it. My thumb hovered over the reply button, trembling slightly. Before I could decide, another buzz, a second message. We just want to move past it. Let's not bring up the past when we meet. The air left my lungs like a punch. There it was, the truth tucked between soft words and false promises. They didn't want to make things right. They wanted me to forget, to pretend, to erase the years of abandonment, the avalanche of betrayal, as if none of it had ever happened. It wasn't forgiveness they were offering. It was silence they were demanding. A small broken laugh escaped me before I could catch it. I pressed my forehead against the cold surface of the table, the wood grain blurring under my breath. The anger came slow this time, simmering under the grief. How dare they? How dare they ask me to pretend their absence hadn't hollowed me out from the inside? For a long moment, I considered answering. Maybe to scream, maybe to plead, maybe just to ask why. But deep down, I knew no answer they could give would ever be enough. Forgiving them would mean carving out the parts of me that still remembered how it felt to be disposable. Forgiving them would mean betraying the girl who sat alone on Christmas Eve, the girl who deleted their numbers one by one with shaking hands, the girl who rebuilt a life from ashes they left behind. I owed her more than that. The reply box blinked at me expectant. I closed the app, set the phone face down, and let the silence swallow the room whole. The room smelled faintly of wet coats and stale coffee, a neutral beige space, small and impersonal, with rain streaking the windows and a ticking clock on the wall that felt louder than it should have. I sat stiffly on one side of the table, my hands folded too tightly in my lap, trying not to show the way my heart thudded against my ribs. Across from me, Morgan twisted a tissue between her fingers, eyes darting everywhere but toward mine. To my left, the mediator, some woman with a soft voice and careful words, smiled in that way people do when they're about to tell you not to raise your voice, not to make a scene. I didn't intend to. I didn't think I could even if I tried. Mom sat beside Morgan, silent but expectant, as if willing this awkward theater into some kind of miracle. I almost laughed. Almost. Morgan cleared her throat, the sound too loud in the quiet room. I remembered things wrong, she said, her voice wobbling. I thought something happened, but it didn't. I was confused. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. The words hung in the air, thin and brittle, a confession but not an apology, and certainly not justice. I stared at her, waiting. For what, I wasn't sure. A deeper truth, maybe. A crack in her voice, tears that meant something, anything. But Morgan just wiped her dry eyes and kept her head down. The mediator murmured something about bravery. My mother sighed like she'd been holding her breath for 10 years, and now everything was fine again. But it wasn't fine. It wasn't even close. I felt my jaw clench until it ached. My nails dug crescent moons into the skin of my palms. They thought this was enough. They thought 3 sentences could undo a decade. Later, when the meeting ended with mumbled goodbyes and tight, hollow smiles, I stood outside under the gray sky, letting the rain soak through my sweater. It was Marla, my quieter sister, who caught up with me in the parking lot. She didn't look me in the eye either, but pressed something into my hand before hurrying away. It was a folded piece of paper. Inside, a few sentences scribbled in rushed handwriting. Her boyfriend threatened to go public. She confessed because she had no choice. My fingers went numb. Not guilt, not remorse, just fear. Morgan hadn't come clean because she regretted what she did. She confessed because she was cornered. I crushed the paper in my fist, the ink smearing in the rain. The world around me blurred at the edges, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. In and out, slow and deliberate. Forgiveness demanded by convenience isn't forgiveness at all. It's just another wound dressed up in better words. I turned my back on the parking lot, on the building, on the people still huddled under umbrellas pretending the storm was something they could wait out. I wasn't waiting anymore. As I stepped into the rain, feeling the cold bite against my skin, I whispered to no one, "I'm not the broken one here." And for the first time I believed it. Days slipped by, thick and heavy like wet wool clinging to my skin. I waited, not because I hoped. Hope had long since drained out of me, but because part of me needed to see if anyone would reach across the gulf they'd carved. The phone stayed silent, until it didn't. An email arrived late on a Tuesday evening, just as I was washing dishes, the hum of loneliness filling every corner of the apartment. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it without thinking. It was from Denise. There were no words in the body of the email, just attachments. Photo after photo loaded on the screen, smiling faces, clinking glasses, Christmas lights strung up like nothing in the world had ever broken. Mom, Dad, Marla, Morgan, even some cousins I hadn't seen in years. Morgan beamed in the center of one group shot, wearing the same stupid reindeer sweater we used to fight over when we were kids. No mention of me. Not a hint of absence. I scrolled numbly, each image carving deeper than the last. If Morgan's shaky confession had shifted the ground beneath my feet, these photos drove the stake clean through. They didn't miss me. They had moved on without a ripple. I wasn't even a scar. The grief didn't come in tears this time. It came in a low, searing fury, burning slow and dangerous through my chest. I closed the email and sat there for a long time, the screen going dark in front of me. The next morning, I ran into a woman I vaguely knew from a job interview 2 years ago, one of the few I thought I'd had a shot at, back when I still believed effort meant anything. She hesitated, then blurted out, "I'm sorry about what happened. I shouldn't have listened." My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" She flushed, glancing away. "Your sister. She called the office, said there were concerns about your character. We were told to be cautious." The world tilted on its axis. Denise, not content to strip me of family. She had stripped me of survival too. Every rejection letter, every awkward second interview, every door that closed quietly in my face, it hadn't been bad luck, it had been deliberate. By my own blood, I don't remember walking home. I only remember the sting of the winter air against my cheeks, the way my hands shook so violently I could barely get my key in the lock. Inside, I ripped a page from a notepad and sat at the kitchen table, scrawling the words before I could lose my nerve. "You will never be able to undo what you did to me, but I refuse to let you do it again." I folded the paper once, twice, crumpling it into my fist. I didn't mail it. I didn't need to. Writing it was enough. They didn't deserve my fight. They deserved my silence. I walked to the nearest mailbox anyway, just to feel the cold metal under my palm, just to feel the choice settle into my bones. Then I turned away from it, stuffing the crumpled paper deep into my coat pocket. I would bleed for them no longer. The coffee shop was almost empty, just the low hum of a machine steaming milk and a student hunched over a laptop in the corner. I sat in a booth by the window, the same booth I used to meet friends at, back when I still had some. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept my hands wrapped around the cup, needing the anchor. My phone buzzed once, then again. Apologies, wrapped in guilt, not responsibility. Messages from Mom, from Marla, even one from Morgan. Words like family and healing and move on blinked up at me like neon lies. None of them said, "I'm sorry." None of them said, "We were wrong." Just, "Let's put the past behind us." Like my pain was something I should have grown out of by now. I scrolled through them slowly, letting each message scrape past my heart like sandpaper. Then, without a word, without even breathing differently, I started deleting. One by one, contacts, messages, chains that had once bound me so tightly I thought they were part of my skin. Mom, deleted. Denise, deleted. Marla, deleted. Morgan, deleted. It wasn't rage that guided my thumb. It was survival. It was choosing to no longer drink from a poisoned well. When the last thread was cut, I set the phone down, face up this time. It didn't buzz again. At home that evening, I started cleaning. Not the frantic, desperate kind of cleaning people do when they're trying not to think. This was slow, methodical, a gentle excavation. Buried deep in a dusty shoebox under my bed, I found it. A letter. My own handwriting, shaky and slanted. A letter I had written to my mother years ago, during the first months after they turned away. A desperate, aching apology for things I hadn't done. Pleas for them to believe me, to love me anyway. I sat on the floor, cross-legged like a child, and read it through. It didn't even sound like me anymore. It sounded like a ghost. A girl who still thought if she hurt enough, if she bled enough, someone would reach out and catch her. I folded the letter once, then again, until it was small enough to disappear in my hand. Then I tore it into pieces, letting the scraps drift down around me like broken snow. I didn't cry. I had already mourned her. that girl, the one who wrote letters instead of building walls, deserved to be let go with gentleness. Later that night, I pulled on my thickest sweater and walked to the waterfront. The air was sharp and clean, tasting of salt and rain. The river stretched out dark and endless in front of me, the city lights shivering across its surface. I stood at the railing, breathing in the night, letting the cold peel away what little numbness remained. And when the first tear slipped free, it wasn't out of sorrow. It was baptism. It was rebirth. "I'm free," I whispered into the wind. And this time the night didn't echo back, it simply accepted it. The gray light slid gently across my apartment, pulling me out of sleep without the violence of an alarm. It was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the radiator, the soft shuffle of rain against the window. For a moment I stayed perfectly still, letting the silence wash over me. No new messages, no missed calls, no frantic pleas to reconsider, to come back, to forget. And for the first time, I felt relieved. The ache was still there, a familiar presence I had learned to carry. But it no longer dragged me under. It sat quietly beside me, acknowledged but no longer in control. Later that morning, I slipped on my boots and walked down toward the waterfront. The streets of Portland were damp with last night's rain, the air crisp and alive. I passed the coffee shop where I once sat waiting for apologies that never came, the bookstore where I had hidden in the aisles, avoiding faces that might recognize and judge me. Today, those places felt different. They still whispered pieces of old pain, but they didn't own me anymore. They were just parts of a map I had survived. By the time I reached the river, the clouds had begun to break apart, slivers of sunlight piercing through like fragile hope. I found a bench overlooking the water and sat, pulling my coat tighter around me. From my pocket, I drew out the last photo I had kept, a picture of my family taken years ago, before the fracture, when smiles still seemed real and shoulders brushed without flinching. I stared at it for a long while, not to mourn, not to wish, just to see it for what it was, a moment that had existed, and then, like all things, passed. I didn't rip it, I didn't burn it, I simply opened my hand and let the wind do what it does best, carry things away. The photo fluttered once, twice, then lifted, spinning higher before it disappeared over the water. I watched it go without regret. I sat there until my fingers grew numb and my breath came out in soft, visible puffs. Until the city behind me blurred into nothing, and the only sound left was the river's steady whisper against the banks. Eventually I stood up. My legs felt strong, my spine unbent. I tucked my hands into my pockets and turned toward the faint line of sunrise bleeding into the horizon. I wasn't healed, not completely, maybe not ever, but healing, I realized, wasn't a destination, it was a choice, a decision made quietly in the corners of days like this, when no one was watching. My phone buzzed once in my pocket, a new message. I didn't even glance at it. I slipped the phone deeper into my coat and kept walking. Some doors are better left closed. Maybe healing doesn't mean forgetting. Maybe it just means choosing yourself every day. Maybe the hardest lesson I had to learn is that not everyone who shares your blood will protect your heart. Sometimes, survival means loving yourself enough to walk away, even when the ones you walk away from are the ones you once called home. Healing isn't about pretending the hurt never happened. It's about choosing every day to rise anyway. If my story resonated with you or reminded you of your own journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to choose yourself over the expectations of family? How did it change you? Drop a comment and let's talk about it. And let me know where you're watching from. If you found meaning in this story, please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapter in our journey of healing and growth. Your story matters too.